For nearly a century, superheroes have been a mainstay of our collective culture, a modern mythology built on stories of good triumphing over evil. But how can we reconcile these transcendent stories with the decades of exploitation they're built on? What becomes of the many artists who give their lives to an industry that silences them? And what happens when one such creator is finally given the means to claim what's rightfully theirs? Debuting in 2021, Chip Zdarsky's series Public Domain is about a lot of things: parents and children, art and commerce, but it's mostly a comic about comics, and the people who make them a reality. Meta-narrative has been a staple in comics for years through different forms, with writers and artists using the framework of superheroes to deconstruct and comment on the genre. This can range from Grant Morrison's semi-autobiography in Flex Mentallo to Mark Waid's commentary on the darkening of the superhero in Kingdom Come, but for Zdarsky, Public Domain is a series that focuses on the people behind the medium, and how they've been ignored and exploited by a world that's been built on their work. While its slice-of-life premise and initial run through Substack gave it a more niche audience than the author's mainstream work, Public Domain and its message have only grown more relevant since its release in 2021, crossing over into print through Image Comics and steadily broadening its audience. Following a family of artists fighting to reclaim their greatest creation, the series is both a satire and celebration of the icons that birthed the entertainment empires of today, giving a voice to the unsung heroes who helped shape the medium. But while it offers plenty of clever criticisms of the industry, Public Domain is also a celebration of its art, and how even in a world where they've been overshadowed by what comes after, there's still plenty of magic that only good comics can offer. To understand Public Domain and its message, one must first understand the comics creator and his lifelong relationship to the comics industry.
Comics are great, you.
Like many writers and artists, Chip Zdarsky, born Steve Murray, discovered comics at an early age, and eventually found work as an illustrator and satirist for Canada's National Post. Zdarsky would publish his own comics for a decade while working at the National Post, but it was through a steady collaboration with writer Matt Fraction that he found his way into the mainstream, co-creating Sex Criminals for Image Comics and building enough of a profile to work on titles like Archie Comics, Howard the Duck, Spider-Man, Daredevil, and Batman. This dual status as both newcomer and insider would inform Zdarsky's larger stance on superheroes, with many of his titles taking on a critical or transformative approach to the material, such as Howard the Duck lampooning the self-seriousness of superheroes, Daredevil interrogating what absolute power does to fallible people, and Batman inverting the concept of the Bat God by emphasizing the character's self-destructive behavior. Zdarsky's work found him incredible success in the industry, but it also made him increasingly aware of the mistreatment of people who shaped the larger legacy of superheroes. Today, the historic neglect of creators like Siegel and Schuster, Bill Finger, Jack Kirby, and others is public knowledge, compounded by the stories of countless creators who scrape by while their stories and characters are adapted into blockbuster films. But hey, they got a check and a ticket to the premiere. I guess you could call that a win-win. Kinda. Not really. This complicated relationship with the medium and the industry is what would ultimately inspire Public Domain, with Zdarsky building his story around a veteran artist, his former employers, and the many lives caught in their orbit.
I love the comic book industry, so it became pretty clear that I had to write about it,
recounts Zdarsky.
I have so many stories in my head from history and from other comic creators about their treatment in the industry. Stan Lee was the ultimate at creating personas, and you feel like the Marvel bullpen was a special place. And as you get older, you realize that's not the case. People are complex, and there are all of these things underneath the surface. I've always been interested in those things.
At the center of Public Domain sits Sid Dallas, artist and co-creator of The Domain, a comic character that has steadily grown into one of pop culture's biggest icons. Having grown up in a world built on their father's unrecognized work, Sid's sons Miles and Dave attempt to convince him to reclaim his legacy, putting the family at odds with rival co-creator Jerry Jasper, armies of lawyers, and the monolithic publisher Singular Comics. From the book's opening moments, Zdarsky uses a series of parallels to build the comic's satirical message, contrasting the humble retired life of Sid with the absurd Hollywood wealth of Jerry and the people who have capitalized on Sid's work while refusing to recognize him. Even the character of the Domain is a pretty pointed jab at how movie studios see comic books, as little more than IP to be farmed out. It's a bleak, cynical, commercialized look at the industry, something that the author only compounds through Miles, who grows increasingly frustrated as his father's would-be legacy continually dominates the world around him.
Alright, the Domain is a beloved comic book character. What drew you to the role?
Superheroes are our modern mythology. I'm just extremely excited to bring that mythology to the people.
Superhero comics.
What?
The superhero comics are the mythology. You're just adapting them.
Zdarsky's semi-cartoony style is the perfect complement to his satirical subject matter, using a softer, heightened presentation to ease readers into the harsher reality behind these stories. I guess people are more willing to accept cartoonish levels of neglect when it's seen in an actual cartoon. This uncanny effect also lets people project real-world events back onto the characters, which deepen the reader's emotional investment. Sid's backstory might parallel the creator-rights struggles of Jack Kirby and his heirs, but it also rings true for any artist or writer who has been a part of the work-for-hire system in comics, and watched publishers like Marvel or DC make millions off of blockbuster adaptations of their work.
Today, creators know the value of their creations. Kirby had no idea he would be responsible for such a driving force in pop culture, a source of billions of dollars for the companies involved,
muses Zdarsky.
I could spend hours delving into the roadblocks and possible ways around them, but a lot of it comes down to this. If you're a company trading on the stock market, you don't do things because they're right. You do them because it will increase profits for your shareholders. What's the incentive for giant companies to have better practices? Bad press? We've seen plenty of those stories, and the audience will still pay money to watch the movies and buy the toys. The general public just doesn't care, or if they do care, they don't care enough to deny themselves their entertainment.
While these real-world influences risk painting a fairly black-and-white view of events, Zdarsky makes a point of exploring this issue through multiple perspectives, using the members of the Dallas family to articulate the full scope, both good and bad, of Sid's work. It's an honest and nuanced stance from someone who has seen both sides of the industry, benefiting from the work of his predecessors while watching his colleagues lose out on pivotal, even life-saving compensation. But how do you reconcile the success of these stories with their history of exploitation behind the scenes? How do you rebalance the scales for an industry that holds such a massive place in pop culture? In the heightened reality of public domain, the answer comes in the form of a MacGuffin straight out of a superhero comic, a single document that completely upends the relationship between the creation and its creators.
That was a young woman I met in LA. She's Jerry's personal assistant, and I guess she just found some old paperwork that says, I own the domain.
Through a mix of classic comic storytelling and his own satirical lens, Zdarsky uses public domain to critique the hypocrisy of the industry, calling attention to the increased commercialization of comics while using superhero tropes to topple the publisher's control over their characters. But is this the right way forward? Can the comics industry be fixed with another battle of good and evil? Or is there something much deeper at play? Since their rise to popularity in the 1930s through characters like Superman, comics have held a reputation as a medium of the oppressed, allowing artists suffering from racial and economic discrimination to envision figures with the power to topple the broken systems around them. Obviously, this isn't the whole truth. As an industry built on commerce, comics are also a mass medium that emphasize the brand over the individual, something that has only grown more apparent as these stories have crossed over from niche markets into the sprawling transmedia empires we see today. And it's this contradiction that Zdarsky takes aim at over the course of Public Domain, giving Sid a smoking gun that so many creators wish they had, only to pull back the curtain on something far more abstract. Through the reveal of a long-forgotten ownership contract, Zdarsky gives Sid the means to instantly turn the tables on Jerry and Singular, with everything needed to reverse years of corporate control all laid out in black and white. The thing is, this isn't a story about the right person claiming their place at the top of the industry, but whether or not that industry is compatible with the art that drives it. The reveal of Sid's claim to the character ends up driving a wedge between him and his family, who each have their own angle on the fight. While Sid sees his years at the job as the chance to provide for his family and live his passion, his wife Candy sees it in terms of lost time, while Miles sees the untold money they could have had, compounded by a destructive gambling addiction and his bitterness towards his once-absent father. None of these factors delegitimize the Dallas family's cause. If anything, they continually show how these systems of commerce and capitalism pit people against one another, perpetuating the same behaviors seen inside Singular. This push and pull between a higher calling and more selfish desires can be read across a number of Zdarsky's stories, and while it could easily paint the medium and its creators in a nihilistic light, the author uses it to deliver something more optimistic and sincere. The truth is, most creative industries are run by people removed from the art, who see it as a product to be rushed out as quickly as possible. But to the artists and the many people who value that art, comics are a medium with an indescribable value. Art that lets us envision a better world and share that vision with like-minded people. It's this spirit that lets Sid finally break away from the industry's system, settling for a sum to cover Miles' debts, and more importantly, the means to reclaim his life by taking control of his art.
This is my reason. This is my legacy, not the money. This is what I want to give to you, my boys. I missed so much when you were young. The deadlines were crushing. I need for the thing that kept us apart to bring us together. This is yours as much as it is mine. I want to make Domain comics with my sons.
By examining the inherent power of comics, Zdarsky is able to elevate Public Domain into something more than a cynical commentary on the state of the comics industry, and explore a path that moves the medium beyond its exploitative past. Despite their power in the present day, these systems are still a product of the legions of artists who work for them. But by contrast, art is not dependent on commerce. It's a product of passion that can still find its reward through the communities that it builds. Sid may not have the same resources as Singular, but his passion is ultimately what saves his family and his craft, with the patronage from fans letting him start his own publisher and continue to rebuild his family through his art. Of course, this is not a one-size-fits-all answer. Younger creators, many of whom don't have the experience or connections to self-publish, are still taken advantage of across the many realms of comic book media. And while nonprofits like the Hero Initiative have helped countless creators through emergency aid, one can't help but wonder why these billion-dollar companies can't afford to give their employees livable wages or better schedules in the first place. It's worth noting that Public Domain's publisher, Image Comics, even came under fire after refusing to recognize a union formed by its own employees, with a union rep stating, "We love what we do, but loving what you do doesn't mean you can't or shouldn't ask for improvements to your working conditions." Public Domain doesn't give a perfect answer to the industry's problems. It isn't supposed to. However, it does use its story to channel a sense of catharsis for anyone who recognizes these injustices, and celebrates the people who continue their art in spite of it all. It's impossible to predict where this could all lead. The industry may improve, it may not. But long after the industry falls, there will always be artists, storytellers, and passionate people working to create the next great story. And there is something comforting and powerful in knowing that. Thanks so much for checking out my latest video. Public Domain is something I've wanted to cover for a while. The comic book industry gets murkier every year, and I've had a complicated relationship with it for as long as I can remember. But I think what I love about this book is how Zdarsky is able to explore this darker history while celebrating the art behind it all. I still think comics are a fantastic medium, but today it's up to us to make sure the creators behind these stories get the payment and credit they're owed. I should mention that researching this video actually brought me to the Hero Initiative, a nonprofit that helps creators with health, medical, and quality of life assistance. They've done a lot to help people in the industry, so feel free to give or spread the word about them if you can. If you like this video, please feel free to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Every little bit helps the channel out a lot. I'd also like to give a special thanks to the Comics Cave, Dom DeFelice, Kirk Ireland, and my patrons, who are helping me to grow this channel and continue doing what I love, and hopefully what you love too. Until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, and stand up for your fellow creators.